Good morning, Mr. Estrada.
Good morning.
Are you ready to begin?
You bet.
Oh, yeah. All right. So my first question for you today is, how did you discern your vocation?
Well, I think it's important to note first that a Providence associate is something rather different than maybe a religious sister or a consecrated friar. It is definitely a form of consecration in the Catholic Church, but it's a little bit different. When you look at a sister of Providence, for example, they make a vow to not marry. They aren't going to have a family. It's that vow of chastity that they make. With a Providence associate, we don't actually make that vow. Our vow is to continue the ministry of the Sisters of Providence, to live out that legacy, to ensure that it endures.
Okay.
But it's a different way of living out that lifestyle of the Sisters of Providence, which is why it could be both men and women, married, single. Honestly, anyone who has the interest, even someone who isn't necessarily Catholic, although, let's be honest, the vast majority of us are Catholic.
Sure. And then you want to cover how, so that was
Sure.
your vocation, you want to cover how you kind of came to that?
Sure, be happy to. For me, I think discerning a life as a Providence associate started in high school. I myself was a graduate of Providence High School. I had a wonderful experience with the Sisters of Providence, especially as being one of those poor and vulnerable individuals that was served by the Sisters of Providence. And for me, from an early age, I think there was an understanding that what the sisters do for the people they serve is something that's very important. And I always in some way wanted to contribute to that. I didn't really hear of the associates until about my senior year. And at that point, it wasn't really something I was considering. I was going off to San Diego for college. And then when I graduated from San Diego, and I was asked the question again by Mrs. Zumek here at Providence, would I be interested in joining the associates and becoming a member here in Los Angeles? Again, it didn't work out because I was going to Chicago. It wasn't until actually I came back to Providence High School that the question came up again. There was an invitation for me to consider whether I had an interest in contributing to the mission of the Sisters of Providence as a vowed member of the Associates.
So it really didn't happen until, what, 23, 24?
For me, it was 23.
Okay.
Which was when I received that first invitation, when I was offered a position here at Providence. And the question was, you've always had this interest in the Sisters of Providence and their ministries. You clearly have this interest in continuing their work. Do you want to take it to the next step? And it was an interesting question. And I have to admit, at first I didn't think it would require so much of myself, but it was a good process.
So do you have any advice for someone who's in the process of discernment, whether it be the Sisters of Providence, the Providence community, or priesthood, etc., any of that?
When it comes to discernment, I think it's important to note that at the end of the day, it has to be your own decision. Mm-hmm. I think so often people are very quick to just listen to what other people have to say, or they make the complete opposite mistake of assuming that there's going to be some big bolt of lightning, that some crazy thing is going to happen. That's not how the world works. God calls us to vocations, to life, to whatever we're being called to do in quieter ways. Sometimes it's a big, loud sign, but most of the time it's not. So I think it's a question of really being open to how you feel, open to times of silence, open to just listening. Sometimes you will be inspired by something you're told by someone else, but at the same time, you can't make that your end-all, be-all decision. It has to be your own choice.
Okay, thank you. And then for your particular vocation, what aspects of it most attracted you to it?
I think definitely it was this mission of the Sisters of Providence proclaiming God's love for all through compassionate service. There are a lot of religious orders that have lay groups. Sometimes you hear them called third or fourth orders, like the Dominicans have one of lay people who contribute to their mission. Franciscans do. The Sisters of Providence do as well. And with those other groups, you notice with other orders, there's often a strong emphasis on contributing to the evangelization or contributing to conversions and missions. And for Providence, especially for the sisters, it was a different approach to proclaiming God's love. Yes, many sisters and Providence associates are involved in things like RCIA and other works like that, but the understanding of living out a vocation as a Providence associate was much more broad. The first question I was asking how would you live out this vocation? The question was simply, how will you reveal God's love? And I love that broadness, because you weren't specifically tied into, okay, well, you're going to contribute to this mission abroad, or you're going to have to contribute to this specific thing or raise money for that. It was an open-ended question in a way. How will you reveal love? And I loved that component, because for me, it ended up being as an employee of Providence High School, as a campus minister. which is how I live out my vocation as an associate, is contributing to this ministry at Providence High School.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you describe how you prepared for your particular ministry?
I actually had to go through a year-long process of classes and spiritual direction that actually took care of Providence High School. There was a group of us who would meet in the faculty lounge every month, and each of us was assigned a kind of spiritual guide to talk to through the process. Mine happened to be a sister of Providence who graduated from this high school in 1962. And as I was discerning living out as a Providence associate in the work of education, it was interesting to be able to walk through that with a sister who herself worked as a campus minister for high school, but also had a deep love for Providence High School. The classes we took were kind of all over the place, to be honest. It was really neat. We had classes ranging from theology on Providence spirituality, what is Providence, to questions exploring the history of the sisters and their missions today, to exploring their devotions, and especially better understanding the patron saint, which is our Mother of Sorrows, our Mother of Compassion, and understanding how this image of a sorrowful mother connects to our own work, this image of the Virgin Mary at the foot of the cross when Jesus dies. It was an interesting topic that they asked us to reflect on as associates. How can we be a compassionate parent looking at a world in pain? How are we contributing to being compassionate presences in the lives of those we serve? And I just found that to be such a meaningful part of being an associate.
Okay, awesome. And then, this one's important. What does celebrating the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, mean to you?
Well, I think when you're asking that question of, for example, a vowed religious sister or a priest, you get a very different response, especially for a priest because they're at the altar. For a Providence associate, when we go to Mass, we're going as lay people. We don't necessarily play a major role. We're not at the altar in persona Christi like the priest is. Nonetheless, the Eucharist, I think, as with any person who works in the church in any way, whether they be a teacher or a vowed religious, it has that same effect. It's a uniting factor. The Eucharist symbolizes this unity in all of us. And as Providence associates, it of course represents this unity between all of our associates around the world, our connection with the sisters, but most importantly, our connection to Christ. The vow, the motto of the Providence associates is the same as the motto of the Sisters of Providence. The love of Christ compels us. And in the Eucharist, this love of Christ binds us together to work together for justice, for compassion, to care for the poor and the vulnerable. And I think the Eucharist becomes that perfect model of service.
So do you think this aspect of the Eucharist was different from before you were consecrated to this religious life?
I think in some way I always had this understanding of the Eucharist, especially because I had already been a religious studies teacher, before coming into the associates. But I think that the depth of understanding of how the associates is a community definitely was deepened by my experience of the Eucharist, especially when we joined together with the sisters. Part of my process of becoming an associate was I was sent up north over Easter break last year to visit convents of the Sisters of Providence up in Spokane. I also got to visit Mother Joseph's first settlement that she lived in 1856, and our first school that was founded that same year. Being able to kind of walk through these steps and see that, especially in the Eucharist, we're united not just to those living, but to those who participate in this ministry who have long since passed. And I think that was something really special for me. And it was my final discernment moment before, when I finally had that choice of whether I wanted to join or not. The big deciding factor for me was being able to celebrate Eucharist at the convent in Spokane of the Sisters of Providence, where I got to see other associates, I got to see other sisters. I also got to see people of Providence who worked in the children's hospital up there where the convent was. And I think that was really that important moment.
Thank you. And then, what do you appreciate most about being a consecrated person?
Oh, that's a hard question. It's a good one though. What do I appreciate most?
Yeah, it could be one thing you do, maybe one word, something you like to reflect on.
Well, I definitely say one of the biggest parts of that would be feeling that I get to contribute to a ministry that influenced me so much. Being able to help continue this mission and vision, especially at Providence High School. I'm a proud alum. I love Providence High School. But at the same time, a sense of community. yes, there's a community of us with the students, us with the other faculty, but in a special way, this community of those who have this special interest in the ministry of Providence, with each other, with other faculty members who are associates, with our neighboring sisters, being able to come together and just really discuss and share how we live out those ministries. The idea of just experiencing community in little ways, I think really is one of the biggest blessings of being associated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You too, Mr. Shaw. I hope that filled.